Imagine waking up one morning and seeing someone standing in your kitchen. They're wearing your partner's clothes. They're using your partner's voice. They know your private jokes, your routines, your history. But as they turn to look at you, a cold certainty spreads through your body. That is not them. Nothing obvious is wrong. No disguise. No distortion. Just an unbearable feeling that something essential has been replaced. And no matter how much logic you apply, that feeling doesn't go away. It hardens. This experience has a name. It's called Capgras Syndrome, a rare but devastating delusional disorder in which a person becomes convinced that someone close to them has been replaced by an identical imposter. Not a metaphor, not symbolic, a literal belief. And the question isn't how someone could believe something so extreme. The real question is far more disturbing. Why does the human brain, an organ built to recognize loved ones instantly, sometimes decide they are no longer real? Part 1. Capgras syndrome was first described in 1923 by French psychiatrist Joseph Capgras and his colleague Jean Reboul-Lachaud. Their patient was a woman who claimed her husband, neighbors, and even close friends had been replaced by doubles. She didn't think they were disguised. She didn't think they were pretending. She believed they were exact copies, created to deceive her. What shocked doctors wasn't just the delusion. It was her emotional response. She wasn't frantic. She wasn't hysterical. She was calm, methodical, certain. She spoke about her real husband as if he were missing, or worse, already gone. This calm certainty appears again and again in Capgras cases. Patients aren't guessing. They know. And that's what makes the condition so terrifying, because to the person experiencing it, the delusion feels like clarity the moment something goes missing. People with Capgras don't usually say, "My loved one looks different." They say something far stranger. They look the same, but they don't feel right. The voice matches. The face matches. The memories line up perfectly. But the emotional connection, the automatic warmth, trust, and recognition is gone. And the brain cannot tolerate that contradiction. When perception and emotion disagree, the brain must choose one. In Capgras syndrome, emotion loses. The mind trusts the absence of feeling more than visual evidence. And once that happens, reality fractures. Part 2. To understand Capgras syndrome, you need to understand something fundamental. You don't recognize people with your eyes. You recognize them with a network. When you see a familiar face, two systems activate simultaneously. One system identifies the face. Another system generates an emotional response. That emotional signal is immediate and unconscious. You don't think, "This is my partner." You feel it. In Capgras syndrome, this second system fails. The visual identification still works, but the emotional response never arrives. No familiarity, no emotional resonance, no internal confirmation. To the brain, this is a serious problem, because a familiar face without emotional recognition shouldn't exist. So the mind improvises. It generates the only explanation that preserves internal logic. This person looks identical, but they are not the same. Neurologically, this disconnection is often linked to damage or dysfunction in pathways connecting the temporal lobe, where face recognition occurs, and the limbic system, which governs emotion. Studies have linked Capgras to traumatic brain injuries, strokes affecting the right hemisphere, neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's, schizophrenia, and psychotic disorders. But here's the unsettling part. The delusion isn't random. It's rational based on broken data. Why the brain chooses an imposter? The brain is a prediction machine. It constantly explains the world using the information it has. In Capgras syndrome, the brain receives this input. This face matches my loved one, but I feel nothing. That mismatch is intolerable. So the brain resolves it by rewriting identity. Instead of asking, "Why don't I feel familiarity?" it asks, "Who could this be if not them?" And the answer becomes fixed. An imposter. A replacement. A double. Once the explanation locks in, confirmation bias takes over. Every strange glance, every unfamiliar gesture, every emotional misalignment, they all reinforce the belief. And logic can't undo it, because logic never built it in the first place. What makes Capgras especially tragic is that love doesn't disappear quietly. It inverts. The person who once represented safety and attachment now triggers suspicion. In some cases, fear. In others, disgust. This is why Capgras can escalate. The brain's threat detection systems attach to the wrong target. Loved ones become potential intruders. And the patient isn't acting out of cruelty. They're acting out of self-preservation. Part 3. Once the brain labels a loved one as an imposter, everything changes. Because familiarity isn't just emotional comfort, it's a safety signal. When that signal disappears, the brain doesn't stay neutral. It becomes alert. People with Capgras syndrome often describe an uneasy tension around the imposter, a sense of being watched, tested, evaluated. Some believe the double has a mission. Others believe it's gathering information. Others believe the replacement is temporary, waiting for the right moment to act. And this is where Capgras becomes dangerous. The brain's threat detection system, the same circuitry that protects you from predators, redirects itself toward the person who once meant home. Heart rate increases, suspicion sharpens, fear replaces affection. In several documented cases, patients locked their spouses out of the house, called the police on family members, refused food prepared by imposters, and in rare but tragic situations, Capgras has led to violence. Not because the person was cruel, not because they were angry, but because the brain believed it was under attack. Real-world cases that still haunt psychiatry. One of the most cited modern cases involved a man who became convinced his parents had been replaced. He recognized their faces perfectly. He acknowledged their memories, but he insisted they were copies. To him, the emotional emptiness he felt was proof enough. When asked why the imposters were there, he answered calmly, "They're pretending to be my parents, I don't know why yet." That uncertainty was the most frightening part, because without motive, the brain fills the gap with fear. Another case involved a woman with early-onset dementia who believed her husband had been replaced nightly and returned each morning. To her, the imposter slept beside her. Every night was a new intrusion. Her husband, the real one, became a stranger in his own home. Capgras doesn't just destroy perception, it destroys relationships from the inside out. Why logic fails completely? Family members often try to reason with Capgras patients. They show photos, they recount memories, they plead. It almost never works, because Capgras is not a belief built on evidence. It's built on felt certainty. The emotional system says this is wrong, and emotional certainty overrides rational correction. In fact, attempts to argue often make the delusion stronger. Why? Because the brain interprets resistance as confirmation. If you're trying this hard to convince me, you must be hiding something. This is what makes Capgras one of the most emotionally devastating delusions, not just for the patient, but for everyone around them. The twist. Now here's where this stops being a distant pathology. You might never develop Capgras syndrome, but you've likely brushed against the same mechanism. Have you ever felt emotionally detached from someone you love during grief, depression, extreme stress, or exhaustion? Where they looked the same, sounded the same, but felt distant? That's not imagination. That's your emotional recognition system temporarily dimming. In moments of trauma or dissociation, the brain can blunt emotional signals to protect you. Most of the time, they return. But Capgras shows us something terrifying. If that emotional signal doesn't come back, the brain doesn't question itself. It questions reality. Capgras isn't the mind creating something new. It's the mind explaining something missing. And that reveals a dangerous truth. Reality doesn't come from what you see. It comes from what you feel. Take away the feeling, and the mind will invent a story to fill the gap. The loop. Capgras syndrome forces us to confront an uncomfortable question. If your brain can replace the people closest to you with imposters, what happens when it turns that suspicion inward? Because there are conditions where the mind decides you are the fake, where mirrors feel unfamiliar, where memories feel borrowed, where identity fractures quietly. Capgras is only one doorway into that world. Beyond it are delusions of duplication, of disappearance, of self-erasure. And once you understand how easily the mind can rewrite who others are, you start to wonder how stable the idea of you really is. And that is why you need to watch the next videos.